In an underground laboratory deep in the Nevada desert, Area 51, a group of scientists and an army general stand around a microscope as the lead scientist painstakingly fertilizes a small human egg under the microscope. The general asks, "When will we know if we're successful?" The lead scientist replies, "In about 100 years." The general is visibly agitated. "You've got to be kidding me." The lead scientist turns away from the microscope. "It's a long process. It'll take a long time, and we've only just begun." Chapter 1. 2 years later, a small boy named Uriah, who appears to be about 7 years of age, sits on an examination table. Doctors in another room down the long hallway whisper to each other about the boy's miraculous mental and physical growth, but struggle to determine a way to predict when the boy's growth will slow, or if at all. The boy walks to the doctors and offers his idea on a solution. "Why don't you implement a biannual PCR profile to track my progress? Within 2 years, you will be able to determine exact data with 100%. Uriah waits for their response, but all the doctors stand in stunned silence. One of them, a tall, lanky, bespectacled man in a white lab coat with gray flecks in his beard, finally speaks, his jaw hanging slack with surprise. "Did you just say infinite?" "Within 2 years, you will be able to determine exact data with 100% accuracy for an infinite amount of time." The words echo off the blank white stone walls. The doctors look at Uriah in a curious and uneasy way, as if they were dealing with a feral beast who had just begun speaking out of nowhere. The doctors look at him in disbelief, as if he had just solved a centuries-old scientific mystery. A short, wide woman in a white lab coat steps toward Uriah, her eyes wide with curiosity. "You remembered that because you heard about it for a single minute?" One of the doctors asks, "How did you come up with this solution, Uriah?" Uriah replies, "When I overheard you discussing my data, I simply recalled a memory of PCR profiling from January 17th at 8:43 a.m. That I heard another doctor discussing the integration of PCR profiles with molecular dissection for the purpose of isolating genes with beneficial attributes of different species." The doctor's eyes light up with realization. They exchange nervous glances and huddle together to discuss the boy's solution and what it means for his rapid growth. They can't believe that the boy is, at the very least, a genius. The slender doctor with the graying beard steps toward Uriah confidently. However, he is still cautious. "How old are you, Uriah?" he asks cautiously. The doctors gasp, stunned at the boy's precise answer. "I was conceived 2 years, 37 days, and 5 hours from this moment," Uriah replies. The doctors begin whispering to each other. Their voices are barely above a faint murmur. "Did you just say you know the exact moment you were conceived?" The tall, wide doctor approaches Uriah slowly, trying to keep control of her disbelief. "Have you known that since the day you were born?" Chapter 2. 5 years later, despite having the mental capacity of a 25-year-old man, Uriah has the appearance of a lean and fit 18-year-old. He is eating lunch in the doctor's cafeteria when he sees a stunning woman enter the room. He is instantly entranced by her presence, causing him to freeze in place. The woman, with long blonde hair and deep blue eyes, sits at a round table with 2 of her co-workers, talking and giggling with them gaily. Uriah sits at a corner table, eating his lunch and staring at the woman across the room. He can't look away, as if he's been struck by Cupid's arrow. He watches intently as her lips form every word, her cheeks flush with laughter-induced blushes, her hair flowing perfectly over her shoulders. Cynthia walks up to Uriah, her eyes meeting his gaze. He is staring fixatedly at her, which she has noticed, but she isn't bothered by it. A warm smile spreads across her rosy cheeks, and she says, "Hello, I'm Cynthia." Uriah is still stunned by the woman's beauty, his mind barely coherent enough to speak clearly. he responds with an enthusiastic cheerfulness. Hello, I'm Uriah. Cynthia, now standing in front of Uriah's table, looks at him with a curious expression. What do you do here? She asks, her head tilting to one side curiously. Uriah responds with a charming smile. I'm interning with the genetic research team. I'm assisting a few of the doctors with their research in human genetics. Cynthia nods, her expression becoming more serious. The Reprevision project, I'm guessing? Uriah is surprised by her mention of the project. Not many people know about the top-secret research project. Uriah gives her an odd look before correcting her. It's actually pronounced the Reprevision project. Cynthia simply responds, I'm also working with the Reprevision project. I'm actually part of the project. Uriah processes her words. He can't believe that this stunning woman is not only aware of the project he's working on, but is actually a part of it as well. Uriah's eyes widen with surprise. You're part of the project? He repeats, not sure he heard her correctly. Uriah is surprised to learn that Cynthia is working on the same project as he is. You're a part of the project? He asks, clearly intrigued. Uriah replies, visibly confused. I thought that I was the only one conceived from the project, he says, his brow furrowed. Cynthia responds enthusiastically, a smile lighting up her face. Well, now there's two of us, she says, her blue eyes gleaming. Uriah turns his head towards Cynthia, a curious expression on his face. Can you hear others conversing as if you can't hear them talking about you as well? He asks, his eyes locked onto hers. Cynthia responds with a look of excited surprise. Yes, she exclaims, her eyes widening. She then turns to Uriah with a curious expression and asks, Can you see in complete darkness as well? Uriah responds with a disgusted grin, nodding in agreement. Unfortunately, he says, I'm cursed by a roommate who seems to enjoy his late-night private activities, seemingly unaware that I can see him perfectly in the pitch black of the room. Uriah and Cynthia burst into fits of uncontrollable laughter, their voices echoing loudly throughout the cafeteria. Other hospital staff members turn to look at the pair, some giving them strange looks, others chuckling softly to themselves. As they finally compose themselves, their laughter dying down, they lock eyes again, lost in one another's gaze. Uriah speaks, his voice barely above a whisper. It was meant to be, he says. Cynthia nods, a smile creeping across her rosy cheeks. Fate, she agrees softly. Cynthia raises an eyebrow curiously, tilting her head to the side. Fate, she repeats, her voice laced with skepticism. Was it really? Chapter 3. Weeks pass as Uriah and Cynthia continue to grow closer, their relationship becoming deeper and more loving day by day. Tonight they sit at their own dinner table in the flat provided by the Reprevision project, enjoying a quiet evening together. Suddenly there's a sharp knock at the door, breaking the peaceful silence. Uriah and Cynthia exchange wary glances. Who could be visiting at this late hour? Uriah swings the door open, his heart racing. His eyes widen as he sees the General Avery Standard, standing in the doorway, his expression stern and serious. Hello, General, sir. Uriah greets him nervously, his voice wavering slightly. Hello, Uriah, the General responds, his voice firm and commanding. May I have a word with you and Cynthia? Uriah nods, a sense of unease creeping over him. Yes, sir, he replies, his voice betraying his nervousness. Please come in. He steps aside, motioning for the General to enter their flat. The General, standing awkwardly in the doorway, begins to explain the reason for his visit. We're entering a new phase of the Reprevision project, he says, his voice steady and authoritative. This new phase requires both you and Cynthia to enter into the world outside of the project. The General is still standing awkwardly in the doorway as he continues to explain the situation to Uriah and Cynthia. His voice is steady and authoritative as he speaks. This new phase of the Reprevision project requires both of you to enter into the world outside of the project, he says, his eyes locking onto Uriah and Cynthia. The General Avery Standard, continues to explain the nature of the new phase of the project. The sound of an approaching car is heard in the distance. The General: you and Cynthia will be living outside of the project and being closely monitored. There's a brief pause as the General looks out the window, then continues. The General: you both are being moved into a 2-story townhouse where you will be living together and going to school. The project is being taken to the next level. Now you will be interacting with non-project participants. The General concludes his monologue with a stiff military salute before turning and marching out the door. The sound of his footfalls fade away, leaving Uriah and Cynthia alone with their thoughts. They both look at each other, their eyes wide with a mix of excitement and concern. There's a long moment of silence as they take in the gravity of the situation. Finally, Uriah is the first to break the tension. "Well," he says, his voice tinged with a hint of nervousness, "guess we better get packed." Cynthia nods in agreement. "Yeah," she replies, her voice a little quieter than usual. "I guess we have a lot to do." Uriah takes a step toward her, his eyes searching her face. "Are you okay with all this?" he asks, his voice soft. Cynthia nods again, but there's a hint of hesitation in her expression. "I think so," she says after a moment. "I mean, it's a lot to take in, but I guess this is what we signed up for." Uriah takes her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "We'll be okay," he reassures her. "We've got each other." Cynthia nods again, this time with a little more enthusiasm. "Yeah, I guess we should." Uriah starts to pull away, but Cynthia holds onto his hand, stopping him. "Wait," she says, her voice quiet. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course," Uriah replies, his expression curious. "What is it?" Cynthia hesitates for a moment, her gaze dropping to the floor. "I was just wondering, what if we get out there and things change between us?" Uriah is taken aback by the question, caught off guard by her words. "Change how?" he asks, his voice soft. Cynthia looks up at him, her eyes meeting his. "I don't know," she replies, her voice wavering slightly. "I guess I'm just worried that once we're out there, away from the project and all this, we might start to feel differently about things." Uriah's expression softens as he realizes the underlying fear behind her words. "Cynthia," he says, cupping her face in his hands, "I promise you, nothing is going to change between us, no matter what happens out there." Cynthia's eyes searches for a moment, looking for any hint of doubt or uncertainty, but all she sees is sincere conviction, and she relaxes a little. "You promise?" she asks, her voice barely above a whisper. Uriah's thumb strokes her cheek gently, his eyes locked on hers. "I promise," he replies firmly. "We're in this together. We have been from the start, and that's never going to change." They start gathering their belongings, packing everything they'll need for the move into the townhouse. As they work, they steal glances at each other, the sense of uncertainty hanging over them like a heavy cloud. But even with all the unknowns ahead, one thing is clear. They have each other, and that's what matters most. They both look at the pile of luggage, then at each other, and both suddenly burst into exhausted laughter. "Who knew we had so much junk?" Uriah says, unable to keep a straight face. Cynthia chuckles, leaning against the wall for support. "I think we overpacked a little bit," she admits, grinning. "Just a little bit," Uriah teases, arching an eyebrow. "We could have fit an entire family of 4 into those suitcases." Uriah grins, shaking his head. "Yeah, because I'm sure we'll need all 27 pairs of your shoes," he jokes, reaching down to poke one of the suitcases with his toe. Uriah leans back against the wall, folding his arms across his chest. "So," he says, "what do you think tomorrow has in store for us?" Cynthia frowns, crossing her arms and mirroring his pose. "I don't know," she admits. "The General didn't really give us much to go on. Just something about a physical examination." "Yeah," Uriah replies, his expression growing serious. "And some kind of top-secret debriefing with project staff." That's probably where they'll fill us in on the details, right? Uriah's eyes widen in surprise when Cynthia pulls him into a fierce embrace, her lips crashing against his in a desperate kiss. Without thinking, he responds in kind, his arms encircling her slender frame as he kisses her back, his heart racing. They stagger together into the darkened room, the door shutting behind them with a quiet click. As they fall onto the bed together, their bodies tangle in a flurry of arms and legs. There's a sense of urgent desperation in their touches, as if they can't get close enough to each other. Uriah opens his eyes, blinking against the sunlight streaming through the window. The room is bright and warm, the air filled with the sweet scent of Cynthia's perfume. He turns his head, his eyes falling on the woman sleeping next to him. Cynthia is nestled against him, her face relaxed and peaceful in sleep. As he watches her, a wave of protectiveness washes over him, stronger than any he's ever felt before. He reaches out, his hand gently tracing the curve of her cheek. Cynthia stirs, her eyelashes fluttering open as she wakes up. She blinks a few times, her eyes still half-lidded with sleep, then turns her head to look at Uriah. "Morning," she murmurs, her voice thick with sleep. Uriah smiles at her, his hand still resting against her cheek. "Good morning, sleepyhead." Uriah and Cynthia sit across from General Harrison, who is flipping through a file on his desk. The room is sterile and clinical, with white walls and a single window that looks out into the hallway. The general finally looks up from the file, his expression serious. "All right, let's get to the point. We need to conduct some tests on the two of you to assess your current physical condition." Uriah and Cynthia exchange a quick look, their expressions uncertain. "What kind of tests?" Cynthia asks, her voice slightly nervous. Uriah and Cynthia sit there stunned as the general lists off all of the unique capabilities of the Reprevision. Cynthia keeps stealing glances at Uriah, her expression a mixture of shock and disbelief. Uriah's expression is harder to read, but his mind is racing as he tries to process all of the information. "So we can do all of that?" Cynthia finally manages to ask, her voice barely above a whisper. "Immune to disease, don't need sleep, don't produce feces or urine, don't experience anger, jealousy, greed, or envy, can see in complete darkness, genius-level intelligence, don't make mistakes, polyamorous, can self-regulate body temperature, can self-regulate ovulation cycle 3-month gestation rate, maturity in 7 years to look 25, then slows down, and stop aging, infinite life expectancy, fully regenerates limbs and organs if lost." The two of them listen in stunned silence as the medical team lists off the extraordinary attributes that set them apart from normal humans. Cynthia's face is paler than usual, her eyes wide with disbelief. Uriah is doing his best to keep his expression neutral, but he can't help being impressed at the scope of their abilities. The medical team waits for Uriah and Cynthia to process the information, watching their reactions with professional detachment. Finally, Cynthia speaks up, her voice shaky. "Is all of this for real?" "It's all real," General Harrison confirms, his expression neutral. "Your bodies have been altered in ways that allow for these unique abilities. We have been working on this project for years, but your case is the first successful attempt." Uriah and Cynthia listen intently, their eyes widening with fascination and just a hint of dread. The thought of their bodies being genetically engineered with attributes from various species is both unnerving and strangely awe-inspiring. Uriah speaks up, his voice steady but curious. "So we have all of these extraordinary abilities because our DNA was tampered with?" Uriah recites the general's words back to him, his voice flat and emotionless. "We would like to think of it as extraordinarily improved. There's no downfall to these improvements. You're special, superhuman if you like. You should be grateful." Cynthia's jaw sets in a tight line, clearly disagreeing with the general's viewpoint. The general looks satisfied, clearly expecting a different reaction. "Well, let's move on to the tests," he says, his tone brisk. "We need to assess your physical capabilities to determine your readiness for the challenges ahead." Uriah nods, his expression serious once again. Cynthia's face pales a little at the mention of more tests, but she nods as well, her resolve strengthening. Cynthia hesitates for a moment, then finally speaks up. Her voice is quiet but firm. The Reprevision is the next leaders of the world. Uriah listens keenly, his gaze on her. He can see the doubt in her eyes, the question of what this all means for them. But he can also see that she's starting to accept their new reality, however begrudgingly. The general smiles, satisfied. You see, you two are the next leaders of the world. You have been chosen for a special purpose. You are the chosen ones, the ones who will guide humanity into the new age. You are the next phase of human evolution, the next step in our species' development. Embrace it. The medical team examines the results of the tests, their expressions growing increasingly impressed. Incredible, one of them mutters under their breath. Their bodies seem to be designed for constant activity. The more they exert themselves, the stronger and more intelligent they become. And their mental health, it's astonishing. Uriah and Cynthia listen with growing interest, the implications of the test results sinking in. Uriah feels a rush of excitement coursing through him, the knowledge that their bodies are primed for peak physical performance, making his heart race. Cynthia's eyes brighten as she realizes the true extent of what they've been given. We're like machines, she mutters, a hint of wonder in her voice. We need physical activity to thrive. Uriah's expression is one of pure elation. He feels more alive than ever before, like his veins are filled with lightning. Every muscle in his body feels tense and coiled, ready to pounce on the next challenge. I never want to stop, he says, his voice filled with excitement. I feel strong, powerful, invincible. Uriah and Cynthia look around the new home they've been provided, their eyes drinking in every detail. The house is spacious and modern, with high ceilings and large windows that let in plenty of natural light. Uriah's mind is already spinning with possibilities. This is incredible, he whispers, turning to Cynthia. It's like we've been given everything we could ever want. Uriah wraps his arms around her tightly, his lips finding hers in a fierce kiss. She kisses him back, her body pressed against his, and he can feel the heat building between them. Pulling away from the kiss, she looks up at him with a desperate gleam in her eyes. Let's have kids, she gasps. Right now. Immediately. Immediately. Uriah's eyes darken with desire at her words, his hands running down her body. Are you sure? He teases, his voice low. You want to have kids right now? Uriah and Cynthia race into the bedroom, their hands frantic as they clumsily strip off their clothes. Their desire for each other is overwhelming, their breath coming in ragged gasps as they press their bodies together. Uriah's eyes are dark with lust as he stares down at Cynthia, his hands roaming over her soft skin. I need you, he growls, his voice rough. I want to make babies with you. The kitchen is bustling with activity as Uriah and Cynthia help their 4 young children with breakfast. The kids are bright and inquisitive, asking questions and chattering amongst themselves in their unique language. Cynthia looks at their children, pride swelling in her heart. You know, she says to Uriah, our kids are growing up so fast. They're already way ahead of their peers in terms of intellect and maturity. As they go through their morning routine, Cynthia's attention drifts to the stack of notes and diagrams that Uriah has spread out on the kitchen table. What are you working on, hon? She asks, her eyes scanning the pages with curiosity. Uriah looks up from his work, a small smile on his face. It's called the Humanity Project, he says. Once it's fully operational, it'll provide full support for those not of our bloodline. Uriah turns to Cynthia, his eyes filled with affection. My precious queen, he says, taking her hand in his. What are you working on? Cynthia smiles at him, her gaze steady and confident. Just thinking about our future, she says. About this world we're meant to lead. About the project. Uriah listens intently as Cynthia explains her plans for a world transit system. He can see the passion in her eyes as she describes it, her mind clearly racing at the possibilities. That sounds amazing, he says, his voice filled with admiration. You know, we may have been given these extraordinary abilities, but you've always been the brains of this operation. Cynthia smirks at his compliment, but he can see a small blush spreading across her cheeks. You're not so bad yourself, she teases. But yes, this project could be huge. Imagine what it could do for this world. It could transform how we live and work. Cynthia's transit system, if implemented, would involve the use of a specialized tram hook system. This system would be installed at various locations along major roads and highways, with each hook being placed within a quarter mile of a residential area. When a car approaches a hook, it would automatically lock onto the hook, securing the vehicle in place. Once secured, the hook would then begin to pull the vehicle along the rail, transporting it to the desired destination. This would allow for a smooth, efficient, and highly speed transit system that would significantly reduce travel time and eliminate the need for fuel consumption during the trip. In addition to reducing travel times and eliminating fuel consumption, Cynthia's transit system would provide several other key benefits. For example, the absence of human drivers would eliminate the risk of accidents and reduce the number of drunk drivers on the road. Additionally, the system would produce significantly lower levels of air pollution, since vehicles would be powered by the transportation rails rather than fossil fuels. Overall, Cynthia's transit system would represent a major step forward in terms of environmental sustainability and safety on the roads.